The studio lights of The View were particularly bright that morning, bouncing off the polished set and bathing everything in a glow that made even the most awkward moments appear polished. The co-hosts sat in their usual semicircle, mugs in hand, prepped with their cue cards. There was a buzz in the air, not just because of the live audience, but because of the guest they were about to welcome, Matthew McConaughey. The Oscar-winning actor had recently released a memoir filled with life lessons. Stories from the road and deeply personal reflections on fame, fatherhood, and faith. Audiences across the country were already embracing it. Critics had labeled it a soul search wrapped in Southern charm. And now Matthew was here to talk about it. But The View wasn't just known for warm welcomes and easy conversation. It was a place where sparks often flew, where hot-button topics clashed with strong personalities. Matthew knew that. And yet, he walked onto the stage with that familiar Texas smile. That slow swagger that seemed to say, "I've seen worse. I'll be fine." He took his seat, shook hands with the co-hosts, and for the first few minutes, everything flowed smoothly. "You wrote in your book," Sunny Hostin said thoughtfully, "about choosing joy over resentment. That's not always easy, is it?" "No, ma'am," Matthew nodded, his southern drawl rich and reassuring. "But it's a practice. Like brushing your teeth, you gotta clean your perspective each morning." The audience chuckled. Even Whoopi Goldberg smiled. But then Joy Behar leaned forward. With a smirk tugging at the corners of her lips, she said, "Now, Matthew, you talk a lot about faith and values, but you're a Hollywood guy. Isn't that just branding? I mean, how do we know you're not just selling something?" The air shifted. The laughter faded. The studio grew quiet. Matthew turned his head slowly toward Joy, his eyes no longer full of charming mischief, but something deeper, steadier, the kind of look you give when someone doesn't just question your career, but your character. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't roll his eyes. He simply leaned forward and said with calm conviction, "I'm not playing your game, Joy." A ripple moved through the room. Joy blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Matthew continued, steady as stone. "You're trying to turn something real into a punchline. You think because I come from movies I can't mean what I say? But let me be clear, I don't talk about faith because it sells books. I talk about it because it saved my life." The studio fell into stunned silence. The silence that followed was profound, more than just awkward TV pause. It was the kind that settles into your bones. Joy Behar, known for her quick retorts and biting humor, opened her mouth slightly as if to respond. But for once, no quip came. Matthew McConaughey, still calm, looked out at the studio audience and then back to Joy. "You want to know if I'm branding myself?" "I get it," he said, voice low but firm. "But when I held my father's hand as he died, when I watched my mother work 3 jobs so we could eat, when I held my newborn son for the first time, branding was the last thing on my mind." His words hit with the weight of truth. He wasn't acting. He wasn't promoting. He was being real. "I've been broke," he continued. "I've slept in a van. I've turned down million-dollar roles because they didn't align with who I wanted to be. I've spent years trying to become someone my kids could look up to. It's not because it makes a good headline, but because it makes a good legacy." Joy swallowed hard. The smile was gone. The laughter on set had vanished, replaced by introspection in her face, in the audience, even among the crew. Sunny Hostin spoke gently. "That's powerful, Matthew. Thank you for saying that." Matthew nodded graciously. "I didn't come here to win anyone over. I came here to be honest. I respect shows like this, y'all. Speak your minds, and that's needed. Yeah. But if we're going to talk about faith, values, or love, we have to be willing to respect that it's real for some of us. I'm one of those people." Joy looked down at her mug. "You're right," she finally admitted, voice quieter. "That was unfair." He smiled kindly. "It's okay. We all ask tough questions. But sometimes, the question says more about us than the person we're asking." The audience applauded not because he'd won, but because he'd elevated the conversation. There was no shaming, no canceling, just truth with grace. Later, off camera, a producer approached Matthew backstage. "You know, you didn't have to handle it that gently," she said. He smiled, tucking his mic into the case. But what would have been the point if I didn't?" The moment quickly went viral. Clips flooded social media. McConaughey stands tall on The View. Matthew shuts down cynicism with kindness. Real talk, real man. The interview sparked conversations nationwide. Not about gossip, but about how we treat people who talk about faith, vulnerability, and personal conviction. Even Joy addressed the incident on the next show. "I pushed him," she admitted, "and he responded with grace. That's rare, I respect it." Weeks later, Matthew was spotted at a school in rural Mississippi, helping rebuild classrooms after a flood. Not for the cameras, not for headlines, just because he could. One of the teachers asked him, "You're Matthew McConaughey, right?" He smiled and replied, "Today, I'm just someone lending a hand." And that's the thing about him, no matter where he is or how famous he becomes. Matthew never forgets who he is or what matters. In a world hungry for authenticity, one man reminded millions that truth doesn't shout, it speaks calmly, firmly, and from the heart. And sometimes that's enough to silence even the loudest rooms.